The search party had one volunteer nobody could identify. The first thing that bothered the sheriff wasn't that Ethan had gone missing. People got lost in those mountains every year. It wasn't even the footprint they found nearly 3 miles off the marked trail. It was the extra volunteer. Because every person searching that mountain had signed in that morning, except one. And somehow, that man always seemed to know exactly where the search teams were headed next. Ethan Mercer was 28 years old and had spent most of his life outdoors. He wasn't reckless. He didn't chase dangerous trails or post videos climbing cliffs. Hiking was simply how he cleared his head. Whenever work became overwhelming, he'd disappear into the woods for a day with a backpack, camera, and enough food and water to last until evening. His wife, Lauren, knew the routine. Every trip ended the same way. He'd text when he reached the trailhead. He'd text again before hiking out. Then he'd call her on the drive home. He had never missed that last call, not once. Until the Saturday, he disappeared. He arrived at the state forest shortly after 8 that morning. The ranger at the entrance remembered him because Ethan stopped to ask about trail conditions. Nothing unusual. The weather was clear and the trails were open. The ranger even joked that Ethan had picked the perfect day to hike. Security cameras showed Ethan parking his truck. He shouldered his pack, locked the doors, and started down the trail. That was the last confirmed sighting of him. Around 6 that evening, Lauren realized something was wrong. No text, no missed call. His phone went straight to voicemail. By 9 o'clock, she contacted the sheriff's office. Search teams were assembled before sunrise. More than 40 volunteers showed up. Local hikers, firefighters, game wardens, neighbors. People in small towns often respond when someone goes missing in the woods. Most of them had never met Ethan. They simply wanted to help. Among them was a quiet man in a faded green jacket. He introduced himself as David, said he'd searched these mountains before. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? He carried a backpack, wore hiking boots, and looked prepared. He blended in perfectly. The first day produced almost nothing. A broken branch, a partial boot print, one empty water bottle that wasn't Ethan's. The teams spread farther apart, everyone hoping he'd simply taken a wrong turn and found shelter for the night. By afternoon, David began making suggestions. Don't waste time in the lower valley. Check the old logging roads. I'd search the creek crossings. Oddly enough, he was usually right. Every clue they found happened to be near the places he recommended. So people started trusting him. The sheriff even assigned him to one of the lead search groups. Looking back, that decision still haunts him. Late that afternoon, one of the volunteers found Ethan's camera. It wasn't damaged, and had been carefully placed on a flat rock beside the trail, almost as if someone wanted it to be found. The memory card was still inside. Most of the photos were exactly what you'd expect: trees, wildlife, streams. Then the final 4 images appeared. The first showed part of the trail. The second showed a man standing far away between 2 trees. The third was zoomed in. The man was looking directly at Ethan. The fourth image was blurred, as if Ethan had started running. No photos after that. The sheriff asked if anyone recognized the man. Nobody did, except one volunteer quietly said, "He looks familiar." They turned toward David, but he was gone. No one remembered seeing him leave. They'd assumed he'd gone home, and the search continued. The following morning, everyone signed in again. Everyone except David. Yet several volunteers swore they'd seen him walking one of the ridge trails before daylight. The sheriff checked the parking area, but no vehicle matched the description anyone gave. That didn't make sense. Neither did what happened next. Near an abandoned fire road, searchers found fresh footprints. Not one set, but two. One belonged to Ethan. The other had been following behind him for miles, sometimes only a few feet away, sometimes stepping directly into Ethan's footprints. Whoever it was had been deliberately hiding the second trail. One of the deputies looked at the tracks for a long time before quietly saying, "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." The footprints eventually disappeared near an old hunting cabin. The cabin wasn't on modern trail maps. It had been abandoned for years, or at least everyone thought it had. Inside, someone had recently built a fire, and there were canned food wrappers, fresh ashes, a blanket, and pinned to one wall was a county map. Red circles marked trailheads, blue pins marked campsites. Small handwritten notes covered the margins. Dates, descriptions, license plate numbers, approximate ages, even hiking partners. It wasn't a map of the forest. It was a map of people. Near one trail, someone had written, "Male, alone, Saturdays, camera. Wife expects him home before dark." That was Ethan. The sheriff ordered everyone outside immediately. He called for additional deputies, canine units, state investigators. The cabin suddenly felt less like a shelter and more like a hunting blind. Someone had been studying hikers, learning their routines, waiting for people who traveled alone. The search lasted 5 days. Ethan was never found. Neither was David. State investigators later determined that no volunteer named David had ever signed up. No identification, no emergency contact, nothing. No one could explain how he had blended into dozens of people without raising suspicion. Months later, detectives connected Ethan's disappearance to 3 unsolved missing person cases from neighboring counties. Each victim had disappeared while hiking alone. Each search included reports of an unfamiliar volunteer who seemed unusually knowledgeable about the terrain. No arrests were ever made. The sheriff retired 2 years later, and he still speaks at search and rescue training events. At every presentation, he ends with the same warning. Not about getting lost, not about wildlife, not even about hiking alone. He tells volunteers to learn the names of the people standing beside them. Because if someone joins a search for a missing person, make sure they're actually there to help find them. Sometimes, they're only there to make sure no one else does.